Hello and welcome to my garden. Today we're flashing back 2 years to when I mixed my own potting soil for my raised garden bed. I ended up growing crops like all of these. To see how I mixed the soil, keep watching. So today I'm reclaiming some soil that was in a pot. It was never very good soil to start with, and I've learned a lot about soil since I got this soil and put it in the pot. So now that I've got it out of the big pot, I want to rehabilitate it before I reuse it for other pots. So you can see how powdery it is. There's not much organic matter in there. So in order to make it better, I'm going to apply some of the things that I've learned about improving soil. And I've got 3 ingredients to help me with that. The first is good old horse manure. Now I bought this horse manure about 6 months ago, and I have left it just in a pile out on the property in the weather and the rain. I've gone and turned it every so often. I was turning it weekly at the beginning and then fortnightly, and then it dropped off as I was confident that the process of composting was well underway, and I moved on to other piles that I'd created. So you can see that's quite well weathered, and it's also got leaves and things like that that fell on it at the time, but I'm not worried about that because that'll give me quite a nice mix of organic matter going into my soil. So I'm going to mix that in. I've got it in this old pet carrier because I really like to reduce, reuse and recycle where I can. And this old pet carrier, we lost all the clips that hold it together. So now I just use it whenever I can for holding things. Another thing that I'm going to use to improve this is perlite. Now perlite's sometimes called volcanic popcorn. It's obsidian that has been superheated, and it's the stuff that looks like polystyrene balls when you get it at the shop. In your newly purchased plants. It's really great for improving drainage in soil, and it also acts like a filter and grabs nutrients that are needed. So this organic matter will produce nutrients, and when I water the plants or it rains, those nutrients will be dissolved in the water. The perlite will grab the nutrients that aren't immediately used by the plant, so the plant can still access them in the pot. It also improves airflow in the soil, and it helps stop compaction of the soil as well, which is obviously good for the plants. Now the other thing that I'm going to use is vermiculite, which is also a volcanic rock that's been superheated. Now vermiculite has slightly different properties in that it retains a lot more moisture. So generally, you don't want to use vermiculite if you have plants that don't like wet feet. That is, that don't like moisture to stay around their roots. I tend to use a bit of vermiculite anyway because the climate here is quite hot and I don't always want to water. So I'm not as worried about root rot because I don't need to worry as much about regular moisture entering the soil. Having said that, things that really hate wet feet, like succulents and some other plants, I won't use vermiculite in my mix because I don't want those plants to have wet feet and suffer. Right. It also raises the pH a little bit, the vermiculite, if you need the pH raised. Alright, so it's very simple. Oh, got a bit of plastic in there, I don't know where that's come from. That in the rubbish. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that in. I don't measure this out, I do it more by feel. So what I'll do is I'll put all this stuff in, mix it together, and then at the end I'll have a look at the soil and I'll just feel whether I think it's got enough organic matter in it, rather than worrying about measuring out how much soil I've got and how much manure I've got. And the reason I don't measure it is more because I'm always doing this stuff in a hurry. As much as I love my gardening, I don't get as much time as I would like to do it, so I tend to do it in a bit of a hurry. So all I'm doing is, with my gloves on, I should probably have a mask on as well, which I don't at the moment, is moving the soil around so that all that lovely seasoned manure gets mixed through the soil. That manure, you can tell that it's seasoned well enough to go into the soil because it just breaks apart like clods of soil. And as I mix, I'm trying to break apart any other bits. Now, some people don't like using horse manure because it introduces weeds. I'm not so worried about that. I'll just pull the weeds out, and I don't mind a bit of biodiversity in my garden. The other thing I noticed when I got this manure is that there were a few bugs in it that are most likely beetle larvae. Now, I've left them in because in this part of Queensland, southeast Queensland, there used to be inundations of Christmas beetles. This past Christmas I saw only 2 in our garden. So I don't want to contribute to that species being lost by feeding the grubs to my chooks as I once would have. Alright, now that I've got that partly mixed through, I'm going to add some perlite. And once again, I'm not going to measure, just going to throw some in. Oh, I'm going to be generous because I know that this soil that I've reclaimed tends to just clump horribly and compact horribly, which is part of the reason that I'm going through this process with it. So to stop that compaction and stop that clumping, make sure there's plenty of perlite. I'm not going to be as generous with the vermiculite because I don't want my roots to get too moist between waterings, so I don't want them to stay too moist, I should say, between waterings. I just want a little bit of water retention. There's also minerals, different minerals in the perlite and the vermiculite. Now there's a little bit of vermiculite in. Again, I'm not measuring. Not as much as the perlite. Just going to mix all that through. Quite a bit of dust coming up from there. I really should have put a mask on, particularly since I suffer from hay fever, but you know. There's a few sticks in here from the manure that's fallen into the manure while it's been a pile out there rotting and composting. I'm going to break up the sticks as much as I can, but I'm not going to take out the little sticks. They'll help add to drainage and they will keep composting down in the soil. Big sticks need to go. Once they're under the soil, they tend to break down a lot faster. You can see the big clumps of dirt, little clumps of manure. But those little clumps of manure, there's no smell. They're well and truly composted. There's no smell there. They're just fibrous little lumps of goodness for the soil. Now, it may look like there's way too much perlite at the moment, but there's actually a heap of soil at the bottom of this that hasn't been mixed in properly. I have another big bucket of soil on standby in case I've gone overboard, which I frequently do because I don't measure. As I said, I'm going more for the look and feel of the soil than measuring. About 32, 33 degrees out here today. It's quite hot. I think there's probably too much perlite. Alright, there's a bit more soil. I kept in reserve to top up if I needed to. It's just an old galvanised bucket that's now got holes in the bottom, so I'm going to also use it as a pot when I'm finished here. Right. Might add a little bit more soil to that in a minute. Should have worn a mask. And there you go. That's it. And that particular soil mix yielded us lots of vegetables, fresh from the garden, for months afterwards. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to pop any comments or questions you might have down below.